One evening at dinner, my daughter-in-law said, "You eat, but you never help with anything." Her words were sharp, meant to hurt. They fell heavily into the silence of our modest kitchen, spreading across plates of meatloaf and overcooked peas like a stone dropped into still water. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. My son kept eating without looking up. Not a word, not a glance in my direction. He didn't defend me, he didn't object. He didn't even blink. His silence screamed louder than her voice. My grandson sat across the table, confused and quiet. He was too young to understand everything, but old enough to feel the heaviness in the air. I chewed slowly, set my fork down beside my plate, and began gathering the dishes. I didn't cry, I didn't argue. I didn't remind them that arthritis twisted my fingers so badly I could barely hold a sponge, or that my back hurt every time I bent down. I said nothing. That night, I lay awake in the tiny guest room, staring at the ceiling fan clicking above me. From the living room, I could hear laughter, glasses clinking, the television playing softly. I didn't cry, but something cold settled inside my chest. I thought about my husband, Robert, and the years I spent caring for him while cancer slowly took him away. I thought about my son, Daniel. As a little boy, the double shifts I worked at the dry cleaners to buy his school supplies, the nights I stayed awake sewing buttons onto his school uniform. And now I had become nothing more than another mouse to feed. 2 days later, Daniel and his wife, Melissa, left for a weekend trip. I wasn't invited. Melissa said they needed space. That morning, I packed one suitcase, a folder of documents, my rosary, and an old leather notebook. I left the house key on the kitchen table beside a folded dish towel. The nursing home I found was cheap but clean. It smelled faintly of bleach and boiled peas. That night, sitting on the edge of a narrow bed, I asked myself a terrible question. Had I really become a burden? But the next morning, another voice rose quietly inside me. What if they were wrong? I called my late husband's old friend, an attorney named James Callahan. 3 days later, I sat in his office surrounded by dusty books and old legal folders. He placed a file in front of me. "You should have had a copy years ago," he said softly. I opened the folder. The house belonged to me, completely. Since 1994, Robert had signed it over before he died. I stared at the papers in silence. James adjusted his glasses and said quietly, "He told me she built this family. She should never have to ask permission to stay in her own home." I pressed my hand against my chest. For years, I had lived there like an unwanted guest, never realizing the house had always been mine. "I want to sell it," I said calmly. James simply nodded. 6 months later, the sale was complete. The new owners received the keys, and Daniel received an eviction notice. The phone rang almost immediately. "You sold our house," Melissa screamed. "No," I answered quietly. "It was my house. You were simply living in it." Then Daniel called, he cried. He said they had nowhere to go, that he should have defended me, that he was ashamed. I listened silently. Then I finally said, "I'm not taking anything from you. I'm only reclaiming what you thought I had forgotten." He asked the question I already knew was coming. "Can you undo this?" And I answered honestly, "I don't want your money, Daniel. I wanted your respect." After selling the house, the money didn't feel like victory. It felt like clarity. I bought an old 4-unit building on the edge of town and named it Haven House. Under the sign at the entrance, I had carved a simple sentence: "No one here has to prove their worth to stay." Women began arriving one by one. Evelyn, a retired schoolteacher. Margaret, a breast cancer survivor. Rose, whose children stopped visiting after their father died. Later came Walter, a widower who made the best soup any of us had ever tasted. We drank tea together, argued about recipes, knitted scarves for strangers, read newspapers aloud in the evenings, and laughed again without fear. One afternoon, Walter looked at me and said, "Funny, isn't it? Someone called you a burden. And with that same money, you built a home for people who were forgotten." For the first time in years, I laughed deeply and honestly. Almost a year later, Daniel came to see me. He looked older, exhausted, broken in a way time alone could not explain. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered. Without speaking, I handed him a photograph of Haven House. In the picture,
Several residents stood barefoot on the porch, holding paintbrushes and smiling. "You built this?" he asked softly. I nodded. "Why?" I looked at him carefully before answering. "Because I ate your rice for 1 year." I said gently, "But you ate mine for 30. I'm only collecting a little interest." His eyes filled with tears. "I forgot who you were." He whispered. "No," I replied softly. "You remembered too late." Now, every evening, I sit on the porch of Haven House with a cup of tea in my hands and listen to the sound of laughter drifting through the halls. Someone is always arguing about how to cook green beans. Someone is knitting. Someone is humming an old church hymn slightly off key. And finally, I understand something important. Sometimes justice is not revenge. Sometimes justice is quietly walking away and building a place where no one will ever make you apologize for existing again.